So, this rant is going to be a little bit different than my usual ones. It's based solely on my recent foray into various different types of content. Pardon me, it's raining, but it has to do with my previous video on player agency. And in that video, I stated that taking away some player agency is sometimes necessary and good for the game. And I still stand by that fact. I stand by the logic of, if a player is actively doing something that is harmful to the game or the table at large, taking away their player agency in that situation it should be encouraged, but not in the typical way that you think of a DM taking away player agency. I'm not saying tell them no. What I am saying is that if you tell them no to this thing and they get upset about it, or they feel as if their player agency is being it's just been taken from them, pull them aside as a dungeon master and talk to them. And the reason this came about was because there was a video by a creator that I used to relatively enjoy when I was but a wee lass. I say lass, but I'm obviously a dude. But when I was a wee lad and I was just getting really into D&D about a couple of years ago, there was a guy that was posting, and he still is posting to this day, by the name of the Monkey DM. And he's from Bulgaria, I think. And he is a D&D YouTuber. He primarily makes shorts. He also has an Instagram account. And I used to really enjoy his content. But the more I got into the optimization community, the more I realized that his style of content is either wrong, in the sense that it is false in how things are meant to function together. He misunderstands the rules, or in general is harmful to the game at large. And I honestly didn't see a problem with it to begin with, because it was just bad homebrew. That's all it was. It was just like, look at my bad homebrew. Look at this homebrew subclass I made that has no identity, that has very weak abilities, situational uses, and is overall weaker than most other subclasses, and wouldn't even be considered. And all I would do is that if a player wanted to play one, I'd fix it up for them, and we'd go with that. However, one of his more recent videos really showed me, not only does he not care about the health of the game or the hobby in general, but that he really only cares about himself. That everybody at his table, the general state of how the game is going and where the future of the game is heading, he does not care. As long as it is his rules, then it doesn't matter. And it was in his water walking video where he does the standard, here's a fake scenario, or possibly here's a scenario that happened at my table or one of my tables, and which they used this obscure ruling or this useless spell in a way that's super overpowered and nobody would have thought to use it. In this video, he explained that the party that he was DMing for had found a use for Water Walk, and that the wizard of the party had found out that the rogue of the party had betrayed them and sold them out to the big bad evil guy. And so the wizard, presumably out of character because he didn't give very much context, the wizard and the other party members, didn't specify how many, so I can't give you an exact number, that they had planned to kill off the rogue. Mind you, all the players are sitting at this table. And the wizard teleports the entire party into lava, 60 feet under lava, and then casts Water Walk, so they all shoot back up to the surface. And they kill the rogue. Now, I'm going to walk past the fact that Water Walk doesn't work that way, and that because lava damage is taken every turn, and since there's at minimum 4 people in this party, the wizard, if he goes last, which is most certain because he cast the spell, then he's taking the most amount of damage and he's just dead. Anybody else is either severely damaged or dead along with them, and even if they do float to the surface and they survive, they still take damage from being on top of the lava as per the Water Walk spell description. But we're going to walk past that. What really irked me about this video is that he more or less encouraged players and dungeon masters that if there is a situation in the game that is detrimental, that all you need to do is allow the other players or yourself to just murder their character with no remorse. And I don't think that's healthy. Many others don't think that's healthy. But of course, all of his followers seem to think that that's a genius idea, that the rogue had sold out the party to the big bad evil guy, and that could have ended the campaign right there. And so death was really the only option. Now again, we don't have a lot of context for this. We don't know if the rogue player was okay with this plan based on the fact that he was at the table, or if this is even just a fake scenario to make Water Walk seem like a really good spell despite him not knowing how the spell works. Either way, in a scenario in which a player blatantly does something that is against the party, I do not think the party should have the right to kill the player right then and there. I do not think that the party should have the ability to kill that player, because all that does is make every player bitter towards one another. Because even if the player who was doing the sketchy, wrong thing to the rest of the party, even if it was wrong, he might have just been doing it for his own reasons. Just like how murdering thousands upon thousands of innocents is perfectly fine in the eyes of the party because they're adventurers, they have to. So it seems that morality in this case is the issue, but I digress. I do not think that players or dungeon masters should use death as a consequence for in-game actions that could be resolved out of game. But Brook, didn't you say in one of your videos that if a player does something stupid, they should die for it? Yes, but let me explain the difference here. If a player actively wants to do something that will put him directly into harm, then sure, use death as a consequence, because you fucked around and found out. If your barbarian player has the same intelligence as their 6 intelligence barbarian, and they decide to run into a room clearly covered in traps and detonation spells, and you say, "Are you sure, based on the information that you have learned and the way that your party has gone about it, are you sure you want to do this?" And they say, "Yes, I'm sure." And then they die, that's their own fault. However, that's something you can't talk about out of game. That's something you can't just pull the player aside and be like, "Hey man, I don't think this is a good idea, I don't think you should do it," because it's in the middle of the game. It's in the middle of the game. And honestly, that's just a stupid idea. I don't think you should have to pull players aside during the game to talk with them. I think you should wait till after. But if your player decides to do something stupid of their own volition that puts them directly into harm and does not cause harm as a result, then sure, punish them with the possibility of death. If your wizard wants to try and 1v1 box a giant by themselves with no magic and they die, that's their own fault. However, conversely, if a player is doing something that is detrimental to the party, and you as the dungeon master have told them several times that there will be consequences for this action, and the other players know what this player is doing, what this problem player is doing, and they begin to formulate a plan that involves PvP or a PK of some kind, that is at that point would be when you as the dungeon master would say, hey guys, this is me, not the dungeon master, this is me as a person speaking to all of you as grown adults. I do not think this is a good idea, because even if you say you are okay with these things, if you are okay with the actions and consequences you are about to take, I can guarantee that feelings will be hurt, that these consequences, these actions, whether you see them justified or not, will negatively affect the playgroup. So I do not recommend doing this. And if at that point they say their piece, and yet they're still on board with talking, with just going through with this action, then I would say at that point there's nothing you can do. You've talked about it out of character, out of game, you've discussed it with the players have discussed it with you as human beings playing a game. And at that point, if the player causing the problems still insists on causing those problems, he might just not be a good fit for the table. You could ask him to leave once his character dies, saying that he's not a good fit for the table. If the problem player has no issues with changing his course of action or giving a sort of backstory reason as to why he's doing the things that he's doing, and is willing to change it to better the game, but the other players are not willing to go back on their PvP choice, at that point, I think as a dungeon master, there's no good options. Because if you let it happen, then the player who was willing to change gets punished for something that his character already did, and out of character explained his reason to, and the other players still decided to kill him. But if you end up stopping it, then you kind of leave yourself open to other players doing things that are unsavory or bad for the game, and they know, based on previous actions, that you will not let them die. You will not let other players kill them. So it kind of sets a precedent. So what would I recommend you do in certain situations? In this situation in particular. As a dungeon master, I would recommend, if the player causing the issue is willing to change, and the party is not willing to go back on their decision to kill him, I would say at that point that the new player, the problem player, honestly, there's just no good solutions. I'm gonna be honest. I've racked my brain about it, but I can't honestly give a good answer, because either way, somebody gets punished. After all, this is a team game. Remember that, folks. D&D is a team game. And as a team, and not just as a character party, but as a table of friends playing a game, you should be able to talk with each other about problems you're having in the game. You should be able to. Situations like this should never happen. Granted, they are going to continue to happen because communication is a skill, unfortunately, that a majority of players are, and some DMs, most DMs are lacking. But I think just talking with your players, talking with your dungeon master about things makes a world of difference. Player kills, PvP. Death is not a consequence for a player doing things that could be easily fixed by just talking with them out of game. Death is not a consequence in that instance. It is ending the game and possibly their enjoyment of the entire hobby for good. So, if you're ever in a situation where you have a player who's causing some issues at the table, talk with them first. And if they continue to have problems, get them out of your table. But do not allow them to keep playing and use death as a justification, because that is not what player death should be used for.